Hi, Trail Ridge. Today we are going to be talking about evaluating formal and informal culturally responsive and accessible assessments. I want to start off with a really thought provoking question said by Gloria Ladson Billings. And she stated, all instruction is culturally responsive. The question is, to which culture is it currently oriented? So I want you to think about that and while we go through our presentation today. So high stakes assessments, what are they? The purpose of standardized tests are to hold teachers accountable and making sure students are actually learning. And then administrators are responsible for low standardized test scores. And then lawmakers, we rely on them to put in proper legislation when there's underperforming students. High stakes assessments and accountability has become very controversial. Accountability affects students, teachers, and schools in various forms. Immigrants, students with disabilities, and poor students are definitely at a disadvantage with standardized tests. They're negatively impacted. And then state accountability systems lead to teachers teaching to the test, which results in negative consequences because the focus is off. The focus isn't on the learning process necessarily or critical thinking skills. It's more of let's teach what is actually going to be on the test. So common methods of assessment, self-assessment, where students are actually in charge of assessing themselves and they come up with their own judgment. Peer assessment includes collaborative learning, where they get two classmates or more get to assess each other in the learning process. And then essays can take the form of summative or formative, and it's a development of skills and cultivating of a learning style. Exams, this could be in-class tests, open book tests, take-home tests. And then we also have rubrics, are a form of assessment. And rubrics are really important to collaborate with students, parents, and families in creating the rubrics so that they fit towards the needs of families and students and they understand the language. And then written conversations, they write in their home language back and forth. Effective assessments include providing diagnostic feedback. Effective assessments help educators set standards and evaluate progress. It also relates to student progress. And it motivates performance with students, especially when they get to self-evaluate, and then teachers also self-evaluate and reflect, and that is very motivational. There's three questions that really come out from effective assessments for teachers, and that's, are teachers teaching what they think they are teaching? And are students learning what they're supposed to be learning? And how can teachers improve the student learning experience? So there's less emphasis on the answers and more focus on the processes with effective assessments. Critical thinking is huge and extremely important to be embedded within daily instruction. Students should be hands-on. They should be interacting with one another and collaborating and questioning. Teachers should be helping by facilitating that questioning and doubting with students and involve students in the process and not be talking at them but with them. The testing process should include critical thinking, and that needs to be more a little out of the box. For example, for language arts, it could be drafting an email of a conversation between two characters that they recently read about, instead of just writing out verbatim a plot or the structure of a plot. And then respond to learning needs. It's really important that teachers respond to learning needs and provide continuous ongoing support for students, and also help students experiment, reflect, collaborate, and test on a daily basis with their content. Informal versus formal assessment. So informal assessment it looks like formative assessment. It includes formative assessment, which is enhancing student learning during the learning process. Informal assessment includes judgments integrated with other tasks. It's a form of formative feedback, and then it's less threatening, less stressful for students. However, the downfall is it can be more subjective and biased. And then formal assessment includes summative assessments. And summative assessments are comprehensive and focuses on learning outcomes instead of the learning process like formative assessment. So formal assessment, the task is known for assessment purposes, which an example is written examination. There's greater motivation resulting in increased stress for students and a need high standards of reliability and validity. So data information used for decision making is usually what's coming out of formal assessment. It's helping teachers get information so they can make decisions on what they need to do next. So evaluation versus assessment. So evaluation is a scientific process to determine performance capabilities. It can be qualitative or quantitative. Qualitative would be including observations, reflections. Quantitative are tests, and it's to determine the quality of an outcome or performance. It also helps make decisions based on the quality. And it can be formative or summative, and the purpose should always be communicated clearly to students and parents and families. Assessment, on the other hand, is an ongoing process to understand and improve student learning. It's to improve an outcome or performance. Again, it can be in the form, just like evaluation, as formative or summative. And the purpose should be communicated clearly, again, to parents, families, and students. The learning objectives identified and shared along with that purpose. So, evaluation, to put it in pretty much simple terms, evaluation is product oriented, where assessment is process oriented. Evaluation is judgmental, where assessment is diagnostic. Evaluation is reflective, where assessment is prescriptive. Evaluation is to make improvement as necessary, whereas assessment is to draw conclusions. So, student outcomes are three major factors that influence student learning. That's number one, student background characteristics. Number two, school related factors. And three is teacher quality and instructional practices have the strongest impact on student learning. And there is evidence to show the relationship between school leadership and student learning. The case study literature suggests the impact on school effectiveness and improvement. And large-scale quantitative studies is measurable, mostly indirect influence. However, school leadership has a direct impact on teachers, classroom practices, and the school climate. Culturally responsive assessments. There should be students' cultural contexts are fundamental to their learning. Performance assessments are great for culturally responsive assessments. These allow students to share and reflect on their cultural identities. That includes multidisciplinary projects, presentations, reflections. Relationships should be at the center of the learning. Teachers should be making relationships with the students to have effective performance assessments. And students' personal experiences should be connected to the community engagement. There should be constant dialogue around assessments, and teachers should understand students as people and understand their culture when they are creating effective assessments. Also, when it's possible, teachers should translate the language of standardized tests and create assessments that are understood by students and families, and then use that information to build small groups, set the pace for instruction, adapt instruction to fit the needs of all students in the classroom. So just to continue culturally responsive assessments, um, it's really teachers need to be aware of how to help students understand questions, tasks, and assignments, and because that's all different for all students. And teachers need to give valuable, meaningful feedback because this helps encourage internal improvement efforts within students, helps them be internally motivated when they're getting authentic feedback from their teachers. Assessment tools and approaches. Teachers should be thoughtful in choosing tests that allow for different ways students can demonstrate their learning. And assessment results need to benefit students with various backgrounds. And teachers, it's very important teachers are aware of that. Approaching language issues in assessment. So here's 8 ways to help with language issues. Number 1 is to assess students in the language that they have been primarily taught in, if possible. And then 2 is parallel versus sequential process, if assessments can be created in 2 languages. Number 3, translation from English to the native language may not be valid, and teachers need to be aware of that. Number 4, recognize that students speak different varieties of English. Number 5, knowledge is organized differently for bilingual students. 6, include important content vocabulary with clear language when it's in English. 7, receive student feedback to better write assessment questions. And 8, allow for student choice in which language they prefer to be assessed, if that's also possible. So student well-being is linked to student achievement. Okay, so student well-being includes physical, emotional, psychological, socio-cultural health and well-being, supported by equity and respect for diverse identities, and recognize rights of individuals and groups and understand the roles of these structures. So the big question is, should student well-being be measured, and how does that look? Um, well-being of the school should be separate and independent from intent of academic goals because we should be concerned about the good of the child. Assessment to measure student well-being is separate from tools that measure academic success. So the assessment piece, they need to be separated. And unique challenges are all around measuring well-being. It's very unique and it's challenging and it's constantly evolving. So students' development and quality of life is what student well-being is. Student well-being is a result of interactions among 4 domains, which is psychological, physical, cognitive, and social. Proximal sources includes, and there's more, but teachers, school environment, peers, and family are just some of those sources. Contextual sources, inequality, education policies, cultural factors are included in those sources. So PISA 2015 used student self-reports and questionnaires to measure different dimensions of well-being, and what came out of that was a comprehensive set of indicators that suggest negative and positive student outcomes. PISA results show students differ greatly within and between countries. This includes life satisfaction, motivation to achieve, school-related anxiety, future expectations, and perceptions of being bullied or by being treated unfairly by teachers. Teachers, parents, and schools greatly impact student well-being, and students have a greater sense of well-being when teachers are adapting instruction to the needs of students and when teachers provide additional help to struggling students. Um, a way to build students' sense of control is to start with easier goals on assessments and gradually increase in difficulty. And then to also provide opportunities for low stakes testing to demonstrate skills before moving on to the higher stakes. And please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you for listening.